I even said in my recording that will be posted later today, stop me if you've heard this before. Iowa's offense looked ugly. I mean, so yeah, I'll let you take it from here and ask me whatever questions you want to ask.
Well, let's put that into context. Of course, the Iowa offense has been ugly for quite some time. However, in this situation, they're also playing one of the best defenses in the country. So that's
Number
part of
one
the
point,
equation.
point number one has to be taken. That's to me, that's where you lead. Yeah, listen, it's hard to really rate either side because they're going up against one another, and you don't have a sample size. You don't have anything to compare it to. But my surmising from Saturday, as it relates to the defense, Mark, is that this defense is going to be one of Phil Parker's best. And this is incredible. That guy's doing right now. This is year after year now. Like, he's no longer having down years. Now they're going to be losing guys next year. So if he sticks around, Kirk sticks around, Phil sticks around, and this is his defense next year, there's going to be some rebuilding. But at the same time, Phil has shown that he's okay with going to get. He's good at going to find transfer portal guys. Now, Nick Jackson wasn't some diamond in the rough. He was an all ACC linebacker at Virginia. But it helps to attract guys like that when you have the reputation of Royals Award winner Phil Parker. So I mean, we don't know. Proof will be in the pudding. We can't really judge any unit, until we see him in September and beyond. But I think this defense, based on what we saw Saturday, is going to be fabulous. And they were also missing Xavier Wampa. If people are, I don't do a lot of this, but if people are VIP members on my board, you learn that he tweaked his hamstring a few days prior to Kids Day, so it wasn't surprising to me that he was out. And we had a couple other guys. TJ Hall went down midway through the Kids Day open practice. Based on what I've heard, he's kind of been the best cornerback opposite Jamari Harris. It's been a battle between him, Nestor, and Deshaun Lee. I feel for TJ. I hope he's back now, because you miss a day or two in that tight battle and it could set you back. I just think this defense has an opportunity to be phenomenal. I didn't see any weaknesses Saturday. Now, again, caveat being they went up against the Iowa offense. I feel better about the defensive line than I did heading into the weekend. And I didn't see anything Saturday that makes me more concerned about that spot opposite Jamari. So, yeah, nothing but good from the defense. I didn't see anything that concerned me up front or on the back end of that defense.
So, Corey, let's hold off for just a couple minutes while people are still filing in to save the quarterback conversation, to move it around to anything else that stood out to you in regards to position battles, who looked good, the wide receiver position in particular. I know that they didn't get a whole lot of targets and opportunities downfield, but what stood out to you aside from us assessing the quarterback competition?
I said in my video, and again, I hope everybody will go over there and watch that segment, regardless of what I repeat here. But I think the running backs looked decisive. I thought Jazz Patterson ran with aggression. Here's a guy who's off the depth chart as of pre-fall camp. Here's a guy who's fallen behind a second-year player in Kamari Moulton. And you almost think, okay, is he going to check out? He looked aggressive. Now, maybe that's just natural for that guy. But, boy, he runs hard, looks for contact. I think he and Kamari Moulton, LaShawn Williams was out Saturday, so that's noteworthy. Your top running back, who's a Doak Walker Award watch list candidate, he was not on the field Saturday, so that's notable. But I still thought the running game looked pretty good. I thought the offensive line held up pretty good. Again, I don't know that the Iowa's defensive line, and specifically edge rushers, is where this defense is going to excel. But we've seen this Iowa offensive line look bad against almost everybody. And against a really good Iowa defense, I thought it held up pretty well. I didn't think that was the issue with the quarterbacks. I just didn't. And I didn't track yards per carry, all that stuff. But it seemed like Tim Lester did a good job getting the ball to his backs in good spots. And it looks like Liddell Betts has done a nice job breeding healthy competition. Again, when you have a number 4 guy running as hard as Jazz Patterson did, that's a good sign. And I thought the wide receivers dropped a few passes. You know, that's par for the course, but sample size is just too small. I mean, I know you said you want to wait on quarterback, but like, there's just too small of it's one day. First of all, it's one day. And one thing that I brought up to my listeners is people, like, they hear Kirk, the first question out of the gates post practice. And I'm the one who asked the question. I said, Kirk, is this consistent with what you've seen through a week and a half? And he said, yeah, probably. But then he followed that up by saying, it's just been really inconsistent. So some people hear that and they're like, oh my God, every day's been like this. What are we going to do? It's like, listen to what he said. He said, yeah, it's been real inconsistent. I don't think that means, yeah, like I'm rating this a 64 out of 100 and every day's been 64. It means it's been pretty erratic. And I think if you really pinned Kirk down, I'm not there every day in practice, but I'm guessing that if you pinned Kirk down, he would have probably said Saturday was below the average. But from his perspective, we're not where we need to be. So this is where we've been, right? Like we're still not where we need to be. We weren't where we need to be a week ago, 3 days ago. Now the hope is that you get there, but I don't know that I read too far into. And that was the intention of my question was this better or worse than what we've seen? And I'm trying to kind of give the offense the benefit of the doubt with Kirk's answer. And now as far as position, like quarterback battle between Cade and Sullivan, I think there's absolutely a battle there. And I don't think, like, regardless of how many snaps Cade's getting with the ones and Sullivan's getting with the twos, I reported 2 or 3 days prior to the practice that a source close to the program had told me that, hey, Cade's still getting almost all the snaps with the ones, but this battle's close. And what we saw Saturday is exactly on par with the comments from that source just days prior. So I think that aspect of things is probably consistent. That personnel-wise, at the quarterback position, things are closer than some people want to think. And I don't quite understand why Kirk does this thing where you give your number one guy almost all the snaps. If you have a close battle, why are you not sharing like equal snaps against equal competition? I don't get that. I never will. Don Patterson's an advocate for equal snaps. I know Hayden Fry was an advocate for that. Kirk is not. Don't ask me why. But I just think it's too small to push the panic button. And it's still early. Like, we still have 2 weeks left to camp. And then you have a whole week of game prep. And I also think this is going to be a year where this offense, specifically the pass offense, that the pass offense, if it's going to be good, it's not going to be good in September. This is the first year under Tim. Cade McNamara is coming off a very serious injury. Brendan Sullivan's brand new to the system. Jacob Gill is brand new to the system. Caleb Brown's a second year into the system and is going to be suspended week 1. I think it's going to take time even during the season for this pass offense. If it's going to get to average to good, it's not going to happen in September. I think the hope has to be, okay, how far can we get prior to August 31st? And then, even though they may not admit this, can you win the first 4 games without a very good pass offense? Can you do it with exceptional defense and a solid run game? And history tells me, Mark, that they can. History tells me if you go back to 2020 and watch that season play out, now granted the schedule was easy when you compare it to some other teams, and the Big Ten in general was down that year. I mean, it just was down. Some of them, Penn State was down. Michigan State was way down. Iowa didn't even get a chance to play Michigan because they opted out because of COVID. I think that all needs to be put in perspective. But at the same time, they ran the ball to 6-2 and were a couple of plays, Mark. I mean, literally, if you go back a couple of plays away from 8-0 that year, because they could have easily won that game at Purdue. Probably should have had they not blown an assignment on David Bell, who had already caught like a dozen passes that day in West Lafayette. Could have won that game 1 very easily. And then they blew a 17-point lead at home to Northwestern, Mark. They went on to rattle off 6 straight wins. They were a few plays away from 8-0. And Mark, was that pass offense good? Heck no, it wasn't good. That was that was Petrus's first year. It was not good at all. Now, they had better receiver play than they had the last couple of years with Smith Marset and Brandon Smith, but it still wasn't good. They took a big step back from 19. They ran the ball well with Mekhi Sargent primarily and Tyler Goodson. So if they can do that this year, and I think they got a chance to because I was impressed with what I saw up front, then I think they can win games. Now, that Iowa State game is going to be a challenge. We all know that. I did just hear that one of Iowa State's best receivers is out for the season. Matt Campbell confirmed that today, so that's noteworthy news for a team early on Iowa's schedule. But I think the hope has to be that once you hit October, November, that the pass offense can evolve to a point where, okay, you're average to good. And if you're average to good with the pass, nobody expects them to be elite through the air. Like, they need to be able to run the ball well, as much as we all think they're going to get pass happy with Tim Lester. This is still a Kirk Ferentz team. So, and I have faith in Lester to get him to that point. I keep doubling down on Tim Lester. I still endorse him. I still think he's the guy. I still think he's going to figure this out. The clock is ticking, and he knows that. I was encouraged by listening to Tim, talking to Tim Friday. I mean, he is just an insightful, apparently appears to me to be a very humble guy. Like, he doesn't appear to be pompous whatsoever. Not calling anybody else directly in the past pompous, but you take that for what you will and draw your own conclusions. But everything except quarterback play was good. And I know that sounds like a stupid thing to make because it's a comment to make because it's the number one position on the field. But I can't really evaluate wide receiver play too much because there's still a lot of moving pieces. Seth Anderson was out with an injury, who's one of the top 3 guys right now. And if the quarterback's not getting these guys the ball in the right spots, nothing's going to work with the pass game.
So you're assessing all of that firsthand. I'm reading articles in a number of locations, primarily in The Athletic, that said, for one thing, for as bad as the offense looked, in a sense, putting everything into context, that it was based on that particular writer and their evaluation, it was the best offensive day in this setting since 2016.
Who said that?
It was the writer for The Athletic.
Scott Docterman? I don't know. That seems hard to believe, frankly. I mean, some of the numbers that came out, and I wasn't tracking. Here's what I do when I'm at Kids Day, and we're on the media side. I'm tracking who is there, making notes of things that stand out. I'm not tracking completion percentage and pass attempts. I know some guys are doing that. I heard somebody say that Cade was 8 of 24. I heard somebody else say he was 7 of 21. Either way, those numbers are horrid. That's 33% through the air. And what I heard was 7 of 21 for 20 yards and a pick. So that's horrid. I mean, that's horrid. But Mark, I don't think you can evaluate this quite based on like the same parameters we evaluate a quarterback in a game.
No.
Meaning, like, we're taking completion percentage. We're looking at completion percentage and touchdown to interception ratio. And I don't know that what different things Iowa did on Saturday that wouldn't do during a game. But that's not, I don't think they weren't treating that. They don't treat those situations like a game. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not, it's not a game. It's just like spring practice. It's not black versus gold like a lot of teams. They're not treating it as a game. So I don't know that you can evaluate it that way.
No, you can't completely. However, the clincher for me, in addition to we're taking horrendous passing attack and then we are displaying another horrendous passing day. So it's not like we showed up at USC or Ohio State and we saw horrific numbers and thought, must be an off day, or there seems to be some concerns, but I'm sure they'll fix it. Justin Fields went 4 for 16 one spring day, and people were going crazy. And of course, he threw 41 touchdowns that year. So that's at other places.
I know.
At Iowa, there's a history. So that's number one.
No. There is no history with Tim Lester. There is no history with this new offense.
With this program and with these players.
But there's no history with the head man on offense.
True.
So that's what I'm saying. That's why I say it's once. I get what your argument is.
Or with a quarterback, possibly.
Right. And with a quarterback battle with two guys pushing one another. And with your top receiver is different. I think Jacob Gill's their top receiver right now.
That's not even the clincher for me, though. The clincher is what you've already brought up, that Kirk said. I would think that he would have tried to suppress the response of, we just saw horrendous quarterback play, at least for one of the two, based on what I read. You can fill us in better than that. That McNamara was pretty much just indecisive, didn't look good, didn't throw the ball well. Everything was a check down or a swing to the running back. Didn't complete anything downfield. Obviously, 8 completions for 20 yards is nothing downfield. Brendan Sullivan didn't exactly light it up, but 10 completions, 76 yards more downfield shots, and looked more confident and decisive. But when Kirk doesn't try to suppress that by saying, hey, this was one rep, this is one look at the passing game. We were making strides, we were making progress. But when he actually does say that this is pretty consistent with what we've seen
But
for the
Mark,
last 2 weeks.
you heard what I said, though, right?
Sure, that's your interpretation
yeah,
of it.
my interpretation is different. My interpretation is he's saying we have been consistently inconsistent because they were inconsistent Saturday. That whether
Well,
they were
that's not good. That's not what you want to see.
we're a week into camp. We were a little over a week into camp.
I know I'm not
with a
firing off
brand new
alarms,
offense.
but I'm saying look at what we're working with originally, and Kirk's not. He's basically stating that this is what he is seeing every day in camp.
Well, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. I guess if you're surprised by it or alarmed by it, that's you. But I'm not alarmed by anything here because
Well, not surprised or alarmed. I'm just thinking that if they are going to make significant progress in the passing game, they're not showing that right now. They need to make significant progress in the passing game. No, they don't need to be a Tom Brady-led Patriots offense, but they need to hit 60% of the passes, throw 15 or 16 touchdowns.
Yeah, and listen, by September they may be to that point, but they don't need to be to that point on August 10th. Okay, that's what I'm saying. They don't need to be at that point at August 10th. And here's the other thing about this: what Kirk said about being consistently inconsistent. So that's what he said. That is what he said, literally verbatim. He said, "Yeah, pretty consistent. We've been really inconsistent." So if they have been consistently inconsistent, then that probably means they have flashed. I mean, Mark, what, a week ago, I came on here and told you from the same source, by the way. It was the same source that told me that this quarterback battle had been really close, which is consistent with what we saw. Same source told me that Jacob Gill caught 3 touchdown passes the Saturday previous. So I do believe that what Kirk said about this offense being, both units being really inconsistent thus far, also can leave some wiggle room in there that, hey, perhaps there have been some big flashes in there. I don't, like, for instance, let me just give you an example here, Mark. And I'm not saying this is happening. This is a outlandish type of comparison, but you've had how many days of fall camp? Like 8. What if every other day, like one day they'd been exceptional and then the next day they'd been really bad? If they happened to land on Saturday where they were really bad, Kirk's going to say, yeah, this is about what we've seen. But the day prior, they might have been exceptional. So I don't think we can just judge based on one day, one session in a non-game format very early in fall camp. That's all
I
I'm
am
saying.
one that usually sides with your conservative approach to this evaluation. I'm in that camp 90% of the time in stating, let's not blow things out of proportion. This is just one out of fill in the blank. During spring, it's 15 sessions. It's just the one that people get to see. However, I'm just putting that together with what Kirk said and with what the offense has been, especially the passing offense.
Yeah, and
What seems like forever.
I agree that I'm giving the offense more of the benefit of the doubt than I have in the past because of who the head man is, because I have more confidence in Tim Lester, exponentially more confidence than I've ever had in Brian or Kirk to fix the offense. And I have voiced concern about wide receiver coaching. I had a good conversation with John Budmeyer Friday, and I'll publish that probably tomorrow. That remains a concern. I had a good conversation with him. I don't have nothing against John, but he's got a lot to prove too. So, we'll see. I don't think, like what you told me a little bit ago, I'd never heard those stats. The stats that you read off to me that you found with Sullivan, that's the first time I've heard any stats from Brendan Sullivan. And I'm guessing probably Iowa's charting those things during practice. I'm sure they are. But at the same time, that's the first time I've heard those stats, and I really don't care because I don't think like the 7-21, 8-24. It's all over social media. That's the only reason I know about him. I didn't think Sullivan and Cade looked all that different. Those numbers sound a lot different, right? 76 yards to 20 yards. And then what was his completion percentage, you said?
10 for 21.
Okay, well, that's still not good, but it's closer to 50%. I didn't know. Yeah, I mean, obviously there was a difference, but when I was watching them, I'm like, okay, drop ball, overthrown, off balance, close coverage. Like, it's just a lot of, I would say 2/3 of those were really good, well defended, and some of that falls on the quarterback play, some of that falls on wide receiver separation, some of it was just bad. And I'm not to the point where I'm attributing this to Cade McNamara being rusty. I think we got to get past that point, right? Because he's been working in the summer and he's working here so far. I don't think Russ can. They got to start evaluating these boys, and maybe that's why they have been giving Cade the majority of the ones, because they're assuming, hey, this is just rust. He'll beat it off. I do think we're getting to the point now as we hit about the midway point of fall camp where you got to start looking at this and saying, okay, we have to give these guys equal snaps against equal competition and play the best guy. We're running out of time for Cade to beat off the rust. Now, I will say this, if there's anything to be said that's positive about Cade McNamara's play, is he did look mobile. He looked a lot more mobile than I expected. And he had a brace on. It was not as bulky, inhibiting as I kind of expected it would be. He ran for some yards Saturday. That's positive. And that's been one of the big things I thought Brendan Sullivan would have the clear upper hand. Now, Brendan Sullivan's still more mobile and is faster than Cade. But I saw Cade look comfortable running the football. So that's a good thing.
If you haven't been able to tell in reading between the lines this entire offseason, I'm kind of a Sullivan guy.
I know you are.
I've been pushing for Sullivan.
I know you are. And I think, hey, you know what? If we want to look at guys who are on this, like Luke Lachey is probably a Cade McNamara guy because he's, he was really hot early in September last year with Cade. But Jacob Gill is probably the top receiver on the roster right now. Maybe it's Caleb Brown, but Caleb Brown ain't going to be available August 31st. I think, without question, Jacob Gill would say his good friend and roommate, Brendan Sullivan, is his guy. Now, that's not going to be what Kirk uses to make a decision on this, but I'm in agreement with you. I think Sullivan, there was no discrepancy to me. If anything, Sullivan was better Saturday. The only problem is we didn't get to see him with as many plays against the ones. But if anything, he was better with the snaps he was given Saturday. Frankly, I didn't think Marco Lainez looked bad. I thought I don't know what his stats were, but he obviously can run the ball. I thought he made a couple of nice throws. It's more than you can say for like a Cade. I didn't see, the 20 yards on how many completions? 7 completions? 8 completions? What is that? That's 4 yards of completion?
It's 1.5.
I'm sorry, 1.5. No, 2.5. How do I say 4? Yeah, 4 to okay, 2.5 yards per completion. Some of those are just check downs. So it was so bad and so ridiculous that I have to think it was an outlier, even though Kirk didn't paint it as such.
And according to the Athletic article, Sullivan suffered more from downfield drops that really could have expanded his stats.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and check. I want to go back and look specifically and chart. I'm not going to chart numbers because that's been done, but I would like to chart, what percentage of the incompletions were on the quarterback versus O-line versus wide receiver play. Like I say, I don't think there were many that were on the O-line. Now, there were a couple of plays. You got to realize this. There were a couple of plays where Kyler Fisher had a sack, and he put his hands up because he had Cade as a strip sack. He had Cade from behind. Cade held the ball too long. Pocket eventually collapsed, but I didn't think it was poor protection. He just held the ball too long, and he threw the ball. That would have been a strip sack, most likely in a game. So that's got to be accounted for as well.